We're going to look at 5 tips for giving your Google Drive the refresh and spring cleaning that it needs. The first tip is to decide on your organizational system. It's always a good idea to go into organizing with a plan of how you're going to do it. You don't want to get started and create along the way. There are a variety of ways that you can organize your Google Drive. Here is one example of a way that you could get started. You could start by naming a folder for the current school year. Within that school year folder, you could create more folders, such as a folder for schedules, class materials, PD materials, and possibly some just generic school materials. Inside of those folders, you could organize another layer of nested folders. So for example, if we're looking at the schedules folder, you could have a folder for district calendars, building schedules, testing schedules, etc. This is just one way you could get started to kind of get your brain thinking about how you might want to get organized in your own Google Drive. Step number 2 is to actually create those folders. So once you have your organizational system in place, we're going to go to our Google Drive and get started creating. Our best advice for creating folders is to use colors, come up with your own specific naming convention, and use emojis for maximum impact. So we're going to go ahead to my Google Drive. You can see that it's a little bit organized, but it's also quite a bit out of hand. So I'm definitely not perfect at this myself. But the first thing we want to do is create our folder. So I'm going to go to the New button in the top left hand and find Folder. This is where I can create the name of my new folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder for the current school year. Then I'll go ahead and click Create. You can see that this new folder that I've created kind of blends in. So in order to help you get and stay organized, we're going to look at some ways you can customize this folder for maximum impact. If I right-click on this folder, I have a few options. The first being that I can change the color of the folder. I think it's really important when you create your organizational system to consider what colors you might want to use to help you stay organized. It reminds me a little bit of being a student and picking my folders for the year based on which course I was going to use them in. So we'll go ahead and change the color of this school year to this nice seafoam color. We can see that this makes it stand out among the rest of the folders, and once I know what color it is, it's going to be really easy for me to access. Additionally, I can right-click on that folder, and I'm going to go back and rename this folder based on the naming conventions that I've used. So for this folder, I want to add an emoji so that it will stand out and be really easy for me to find. To do this, I can click anywhere in this name box, and wherever my cursor is, I can right-click, and in this menu that pops out, I have the option to add in an emoji. You can also notice that your keyboard shortcut is the Windows key and a period, so that's a quick and easy way to add an emoji in the future. From here, I can choose any number of emojis that I want to use. I can use more than one, but I'm going to go ahead and my naming convention, I'm going to stick with colors. So I will go ahead and use this green heart to go with my seafoam folder. We can see that it did pop up in the rename, and since I'm only using one, I can go ahead and click the X. I'm going to add a little space in there. So some ideas for naming conventions, you could start everything with a letter so that you can alphabetically organize your Google Drive. You could use numbers, whatever makes sense for you. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And you can see now that I have my green folder for this school year. And if you look above, you can see that I have a blue folder ready to go for the next school year. Now that I have this nice new folder for 2021-2022, I can double click to open it. And then I can get creating in here with the folders that need to be nested inside. So if you think back to that organizational template that I showed you, I could start creating those folders now so that I'm ready to really get organized here shortly. The next tip for spring cleaning your Google Drive is to delete any old files. I think a good rule of thumb is that if you haven't used or opened or referenced a file in 2 or more years, it's probably good to go. Now, I will say be careful with student data and how long you need to keep that, but any old lessons or PD resources that you haven't used in at least 2 years, you're probably not going to use in the future. So you might as well get rid of it. So I'm going to return to my Google Drive and look for some files that are ready to be deleted. I'm going to scroll to the bottom because anything that doesn't live in a folder is at the bottom of my Google Drive and probably something that I'm not referencing frequently since I haven't found a spot for it. So if I see right here, I actually have 2 of the same Google Sheets, so I know that I can probably get rid of one. So I'm going to click on one. I can see that it's highlighted in blue, and if I right-click, I have the option to remove. I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to show you how you can quickly get rid of multiple items. For starters, if I click on this item that I know I want to delete, and I press the Control button, I can click on a second item, and I can see that they're both highlighted. If I were to right-click and choose Remove, then I would be able to delete both of these at the same time. So this will expedite the process of cleaning up my Google Drive and getting rid of some of my old files. Additionally, let's say that I have a bunch of files consecutively that I no longer need. So if I'm looking right here, I have about 5 of the exact same documents. I'm going to go ahead and click the first one. And if I press the Shift key, I can also click the last one, and everything in between is going to be highlighted. Again, I could right-click, I could press Remove, and then I can choose to move to trash. Just so you know, your items that you delete will live in the trash for 30 days. So you have 30 days to undo if you accidentally delete something that you need. So there is a little bit of a cushion. It's not gone forever immediately. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. But just as a reminder, go through and clean up any items that you might have duplicates of or that you no longer need. Your fourth tip for spring cleaning is to rename all untitled items. I can't tell you how often I open a document, I get started, I exit out, and I never go back and rename it. So if we return to my Google Drive and scroll to the very bottom, it might take a while because I do have a lot of things that are not organized. But we can see right here that I have all kinds of Google Docs, a Google Forms, some slide decks that are untitled. Now, that's not helping me. I have no idea what's in there. So I encourage you to go through, open up some of your documents, and from there, give them a name. Our final tip for this spring refresher is to put everything in a folder. Everything needs a home. So when I return to my Google Drive, just like I showed you down here, all of these untitled documents as well as all of these other files are living outside of a folder, and that's not doing me any good. So I encourage you to move anything that is not in a folder into a folder. If you don't have a folder created on where it should go, that's a great opportunity for you to find a new folder to create so that everything has a place in your Google Drive. So for example, I can right-click and choose the Move To option. And I can move this to my Edu folder. I can go ahead and click that Move button. You also have the ability to drag and drop. So I have my FETC notes here. I can drag and scroll to the top of my Google Drive and put this in my conference folder. Both of these are fine options. I prefer the move option as opposed to the drag and drop because that does get a little time consuming. Hopefully you learned something new or are inspired to go refresh and spring clean your Google Drive using these 5 tips.